So, uh, Marla, just real fast for everybody, so everybody knows a little bit about who you are, your history, and tell everybody a little bit about what you push for. I kind of want to give you a little platform to start with on this conversation.
Hey, I appreciate that. So I'm Marla Cloos, the Green Home Coach, and I really advocate for us all to have healthier homes and more comfortable homes through green and sustainable practices and product swaps. And product swaps are a really easy place to start for a lot of people, or just simple behavior swaps. And while I can work on entire green homes and buildings, helping people to see how they can take action and get started is what really, really gets me excited because it's just something we all get to do.
Well, as we've seen, with the trend, basically, it's not even a fad anymore. It's really here to stay. The effort and thought that goes into every home now, when it comes to whether it's sustainability, we've definitely seen a big trend towards more of the contemporary design,
Mhm.
modern architecture, which I mean, a couple of the architects that are out there just do some phenomenal work with it. But then it's because they want to bring the outdoors in, which has been a recurring theme way back from the recession. That was the whole theme in the industry. But now it's really, without even saying, it's part of the whole design process.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so you laid out a six categories basically that you look at when you're looking at a green home. Can you kind of touch on some of those points that you we look at, what you categorize, and then we can dive into that? Because while I was looking at them, I was like, there's a lot of overlap with what we do and what I'm adamant about, and
Yep.
what you're looking at here.
And I love the fact that you started this off with, how the design of homes has changed and is continuing to change and bring the outdoors in and the indoors out. And the pandemic has actually kind of sped a lot of this up. And that really ties in with these six categories. So there's five physical categories and one that's informational or educational. That one kind of always surprises people. So you got to hang on till the end of this conversation. One of the things that I want you all to think about is it, having a better home is not all or nothing. And I think a lot of us, we read through the home magazines and the home and garden magazines, and we see these beautiful, lavish, high performance homes that are millions of dollars or hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're out of our reach. And when we're doing show homes and model homes, we're showing off the best we got, right? But what we don't always do is help people to distill that into something that they can see themselves in, or you can see yourself in, or I can see myself in. I don't live in a perfectly green home. I wish I did, but we bought a home that had a good foundation in green practices and gave us other opportunities to improve. So when I went out and we were shopping for a house, I took these categories and looked at our potential home in light of these categories. And I just had this same conversation with a real estate friend of mine. I mean, literally before I came on with you. And how do you use this information to buy a better home that fits you and what you need? Right? So,
So
five
we
categories. What?
so the where you live
Yeah.
is one that I don't know if you can build a house anywhere. And I've been lucky enough to be able to work with some of our clients while they're working with the architects and the engineers to go and visit sites, because finally people are starting to say, hey, the landscape's as important as what,
Yeah.
the exterior of the house and how it all works together. And, being in St. Louis, there's a lot of clay here, there's a lot of rock. What are you going to have to put into what work you have to do, which, when it comes to green practices, how much effort has to go into it. Effort takes equipment. It takes a lot of minutia to make things work. Maybe not so many of the green practices when you start getting into blasting and those kind of things. But I mean, I know when I look at a site, I want to make sure that before the house is even built, you actually have something that kind of has a little bit of an emotional toll to it, because you're going to be building a place that basically it's your oasis, it's your getaway. And but
Absolutely.
with that, you don't want to have to create an immense amount of impact on the land, because that just means more maintenance. It means a lot of, upkeep. It means a lot of things that people want to get away from, because everything I hear now is, I don't want maintenance. Now,
And that's one
there's
of the big benefits of building and remodeling and maintaining with green and sustainable practices and products. It's that is the whole one of the whole big goals, right? Is livability, less maintenance, more durable. Everybody thinks it's all about energy efficiency or eco or environmentalism, and it's not. If there's good health for us, there's likely good health for our communities and the bigger world too, and they all interact. So, to your point, where a house lives is how that house interacts with the land that it's on. So, how you're going to put a foundation in. What direction does the house face? When we were shopping for a house, we wanted to be able to sit out on our patio in the evenings. So we chose a house that did not have a west facing backyard so that we could sit out on our patio. Um, Looking at things such as overhangs or shading for your windows so that they're not just blaring hot in the middle of the heat for places that have hot summers, like where you live and where I live.
Mhm.
Um, So, it, how that house interacts with the land also means how it interacts with the sun and the environment around it. And then you can get into all the landscaping things. How do you use landscaping for energy efficiency? That might be foundation plantings or a windbreak. I mean, I'm in Oklahoma where the wind comes sweeping down the blade.
We put in a
So,
lot of windbreaks over on
yeah,
the Illinois side, where either north of here in St. Louis, north of 70, but over in Illinois, where it's just all flat, no
yeah,
hills. I mean, that's when I was much younger, when I was like 18, 19, I was working with a few clients, and they wanted trees for a windbreak. And I was like, a windbreak? Why? I've never heard of people using trees for a windbreak before when I was, and so now it makes sense, because the amount of wind that comes through some of these places, just the slightest break will make all the difference. When it comes to also the wind that gets into the home, the air that gets into the home, how tight a home is put together as well, it all has a big impact.
yeah. And where do you put trees to shade? What kind of trees do you want? Where do you use an evergreen versus a deciduous tree? All of these things are that relationship and that intersection between the home and the property, the land. And I think a lot of people just think, oh, well, it just means it's how I'm landscaping. And it's so much more than that.
Well, a lot of the experience that I had with choosing a site is also just because I'm working on a lot of custom homes. The house isn't even built yet, and
Yeah.
so I'm looking for the heirloom trees. Which an heirloom tree, for anybody that doesn't know, it's basically any tree that you can't replace on a site. Some of these 36-inch oaks that are 50, 60, 70 foot tall, they have these beautiful long canopies on them. And people want to place these gorgeous homes, and trying to fit them such that we're not going to just devastate a site. Because
Yeah.
what people don't also realize is, you clear cut a whole lot, those trees hold thousands of gallons of water. And all of a sudden, starting to create water issues, or they're cutting stumps down and not realizing they're taking the stumps out. Those stumps are rotting, and all the time, they're creating more water issues because they're creating cavities under the ground. Or the other thing is are they going to have to grade the lot in order to make the lot drain, depending on what kind of house or what size house you're building there. So, I mean, really, the lay of the land has a lot before you even think of doing anything. But to your point, if you're buying an existing home, you know, definitely take a look at what new development around it might be impacting it as well, because every these new subdivisions, I equate it to, you put rocks in a glass of water, and all of a sudden the water is flowing. Well, what are you doing with the water tables, and what are you doing with all the water runoff? I lived in Glendale, and it was crazy how much water and a rain would just flow down the street and puddle and flood everything. And it was almost every single rain. It's just because of all the development they had. The bigger the homes, that's where all the water systems are coming in place, the BMPs, the rain gardens, and the water retention.
Well, and that's another case. Anytime that you can replace hardscape, concrete, uh, stone, on the ground with a garden or a rain garden, even better yet, if you've got areas that puddle up, which I have one that I need to go do in my front yard. But that's another way to keep the water on the property and let it percolate back down. I mean, that you've created some beautiful rain gardens that I've seen on your website. And it's it's a way to offset, how much we are capping off the top layer of our ground, of our earth. They said that Houston flooded so badly. What was that, a couple of years ago when they got all that rain with that hurricane? They said it flooded so badly because there was so much development throughout the city and the county that there was no place for the water to seep through into the earth. And you think about that, that's not healthy. That's not, it's not healthy for our short-term benefit because we're all rowing a boat. And it's not healthy for the water table, is not healthy for the runoff. There's so many things that happen that are negative impact. I mean, they told you not to even walk in the water because it was so polluted. And
Well, you think about
that's
all the
just so
runoff.
frightening.
You think of all the runoff on all the roadways,
Yeah.
all the parking lots. What
All
your,
that
your
oil.
cars, cars are leaking oil. Well, not only that, asphalt, it's all asphalt, all petroleum based. It's all oil. But your cars are leaking oil. Cars are leaking antifreeze. In some cases, I've seen cars leaking fuel, which is dangerous. You need to get that fixed. but all these chemicals are just being washed into nearby waterways. But that's where also these rain gardens, also bioswales, are actually a natural filter, which pull a lot of these chemicals and toxins out of this water before it can filter, before it hits that water table again, which is huge. So your point number two, though, the stuff though that makes a home. And so I saw that, I was like, what? So what is this stuff? That
there's a formal word for that.
Okay.
But it's all the resources and all the materials that go into making that structure into a home. And not everybody, a lot of us have all these wild assumptions that in order for something to be quote unquote, air quotes, green or sustainable or high performance, that it's got to have all this special stuff. And it doesn't. It needs to have materials in there that are going to resist water, that are going to be easy to maintain, that we can optimize the use of them. So we have a huge lumber issue going on right now, right?
Massive. Oh my gosh. I've talked to a few builders and their prices are doubling.
Lumber price since April has, I think, doubled. And we just burned, I don't remember how many houses worth of lumber down with the wildfires out west. Mm-hmm. So we've taken an already very constrained situation and made it even crazier with all these wildfires. And we don't have a good backup plan for that. But this is where resource efficiency comes in. Use what little lumber we have smarter. I drive around homes here that are newly constructed, and there's piles of lumber out in the front yard, waste lumber, piles. And I want to go by and I want to write a price tag and leave it on the front. Because it's ridiculous. Any rate, or choose materials that are not lumber. Choose different building materials. I'm working on an ICF home right now. You know ICF, right?
So So explain that. Explain to a lot of people that might not know what it is.
So insulated concrete forms, and it looks like a big Lego block, and it's made out of foam. And you stack them, and you kind of offset them so there's more structural integrity to it. And then you run rebar to support it down the inside, and you fill it up with concrete. So here's what you get with all that. You get great insulation, so they're super comfortable homes. You get a very resilient home. It's very strong.
Yeah,
so it's resistant to hurricanes. I don't know if you remember the picture, and it was one of the coastal towns that got hit in the Florida Peninsula or Panhandle a year or two ago. And there was this photo that went around on social media of one home standing on the beach, and everything else was gone. And that one home was built with ICF. And they also brought in a number of other resilient techniques, but it was an ICF home and it withstood that hurricane.
I've been seeing a number of those pop up around here in St. Louis, even as early as 2012. I saw a few around the Kirkwood area.
There were some out in Eureka too.
Yeah, and they're building that monster mansion that's down by Branson. is all a concrete home as well as what I saw. So anybody that's familiar with that, I know that went around
And
social media
more,
for a
I
while.
think it is. I've been
Yeah,
down there. I've
yeah,
actually seen
yeah.
it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's built with a slightly different kind of concrete or insulated concrete forms, which is really cool, is that they assemble the one side of that is concrete and one side, the inside's insulation. And they use like a form so they could like have a decorative pattern on the concrete on the outside.
Huh.
So it was really
And
kind of
anybody
cool.
doesn't know this house, I mean,
Oh, and
if
that
you
castle.
Google, yeah, if you Google this thing, and you
Gunsmith,
understand
I
that all
think
those
is it.
walls are concrete, it's pretty impressive. It's impressive in and of itself.
Yeah. But there's
So,
all kinds of options like that that we can either optimize materials, choose more durable materials that are going to last longer, or choose a different kind of material that can perform better, or some variation of thereof.
but with that, it leads really into your next point is zip the code of your home. And I've been in older homes, and, and everybody talks about draftiness of a home. I've been in brand new homes. I've been in some of the luxury, high performance homes. I've been all over in all of these different types of houses. So there is a degree of how tight you can make a home, and there's always, I've heard debates on both sides. Is it good to have a house that's that tight because of all the chemicals that there is in a home? And to what degree is good and what degree is bad?
Okay. So building science says build the house as tight as you can. However, you must mechanically ventilate that home. Or if you live in a climate where you don't have to have a lot of heating and cooling, you could naturally ventilate that home. But when we get down to talking more about breathing, we'll elaborate on this whole idea of how you
Okay.
can do that well in your home. But the envelope, so think of the envelope of your home like your skin on your body. And it's the barrier between the inside and the outside. So you want to have, if you want to have a well-controlled environment that you live in your home, you must exclude the outdoor environment. A lot of people say, well, I need a leak to let the air in. No, because what's happening is it's filtering through the walls. It's filtering through the cracks. And when it filters through, guess what it brings with it? Whatever's in that wall or those cracks.
Yep.
That could be insects, that could be chemicals, that could be moisture. Moisture is our biggest enemy in a building. I mean, water is our biggest friend and our biggest foe.
Especially the humidity here in St. Louis.
Oh, yeah. But water destroys more buildings than anything else. And in all forms, vapor, liquid, and solid, ice. So yeah, if you plan for it, you can help it. So building envelope. So the outside structure of a home, and this is basically your coat or your parka. However, if you leave cracks in that home, you haven't zipped up the coat. And many, many times, a lot of little cracks in a home or little penetrations, like where the vent goes outside for the dryer, or where the hose bib goes out from the water that's piped through the home, or where your chimney goes out the roof. If those penetrations are not sealed well, they are a hole that the conditioned air leaks out of. And, we paid for conditioned air, right? So now you add up all the square inches of all those holes, and a lot of times they are like as big as leaving a window open. But we don't think about it because we don't see it. It's invisible. So every time you have another crack or another penetration, that parka is unzipped more. And at some point in time, if it's big enough, like leave a window open when it's 35 degrees outside, that's going to really change the comfort in your home, right? So you've got maybe you've got this great insulation, but it's not air sealed. It's not sealed up where all those holes poke through the sides. Then you have essentially left the parka wide open. And we're starting to see more and more insulators, builders, and remodelers talk about insulation and air sealing hand in glove, which they really need to be because they're part of a system of protecting the inside of the home from the air and the water that comes from the outside.
Well, and that leads to a great point of your next point here is water, just what we need. So not just in the, it's more in a use method, but you want to make sure that also the house, if the air is breaking through all these different leaks and getting in the home. We talk about the moisture. I mean, air, water, it just create a recipe for disaster, especially depending on the areas of the country that you live in. Again, the high humidity is definitely something that I've seen play havoc on homes. I've seen brand new homes already get black mold issues because through the building process, they didn't, take care of things properly as the construction was ongoing. So I've seen some crazy things, but water is something that I know, especially in St. Louis with MSD and the water systems, sewer systems being absolutely tapped. That's why we have so much flooding issues here. If you
Yeah.
remember, Manchester Road area just kind of always being flooded. Glendale dealt with a lot of water issues, and then down Manchester further east, a lot of other water issues down there. Not just there, but a lot of other areas too. But those are the ones that stand out in my mind the most because they always make the news.
Yeah, there you go.
So this has become such a big topic as we talk about sustainability, as we talk about green homes. I mean, water conservation has really taken a forefront. That's one of the things that is actually tangible that we can look at besides the air. What are you seeing? And I'm excited to get to the landscape side of this part of the gardening side of this point because there's some cool things about it. But what are you seeing with the homes and water conservation?
Okay. So first of all, I want to speak to a point that you said earlier
Okay.
that water is it's so interlaced with all of the different parts of how we live in and build and remodel and use our homes. So like we addressed some water issues when we're talking about where the house is. We address some water issues when we talk about breathing because some of that water is in the air. That's where the mold and the mildew gets to be really icky. And then you've got this whole issue of how do we use water wisely. So one of the things I love about water use is that it is so easy to get started. So easy. Do you have any idea what the number one thing is we can each and every one of us do to conserve water?
I'm not even going to go
I
on a
put
limb
you
on
on the
that.
spot.
I'm gonna defer to you back to that one.
Okay, you're going to do a duh. I could have had a V8 in a moment. Turn it off. Turn off the water when you don't need it. We waste so much water. We waste it when we're brushing our teeth or shaving or washing our hands or washing the car. And especially when we're outside and it's running down the concrete, it's not benefiting anyone. If you got to keep the hose on, at least throw it in the yard or the garden. But just turning it off. So this simple behavioral change can save so much money and time and water, which is what we need to really save. So that's my number one. It's just be conscious of it. Turn it off. Number two, so easy to put water saving fixtures in our homes. If you don't want to swap out your plumbing fixtures, you can buy the little aerators that go into your sink faucets and they will aerate the water so it feels like you're getting just as much water, but you're using much less. The shower heads now are fabulous. I have one that feels so great, but it is a WaterSense qualified. WaterSense is a label that's put out by the government that's like Energy Star, except it's for water. And it says that a fixture has met a certain level of water conservation. So they do them for toilets, for faucets, for irrigation, for outside irrigation. But that's
I got a good one on there. I got good points in irrigation.
Yeah, so saving water inside of our homes is by using less with behavioral, with using our brain, and then using fixtures that use less water saving.
Well, a lot of us also, I mean, we grew up with just it's there, just using it. This is a whole new concept. So most population still has to get accustomed to being water conscious with how we do things. And honestly, now, talking about just touching the irrigation real fast, is a lot of people don't understand how much water actually costs until they actually have to pay the bill for it.
And they
And
usually double in the summer for most people that have a sprinkler system.
well,
They
I
can
can't tell you how many times that we've gotten a phone call where an irrigation pipe burst and they were out of town for 2 weeks. So they have a
Oh,
1 inch line just constantly spewing water, and they get a water bill to the
ugh,
tune of a couple $1,000s. Then it really starts to hit home as like, hey, this can really add up. And I love irrigation systems, kind of nerd out on them, but at the same time, only when they're necessary. And it comes a lot with that comes. There's a big point. It comes to how do you plant your plants, and what I mean by that is what's the matrix, what's the makeup of the plants. If you're going to put water needy plants next to
yeah,
plants that
zone
don't like a
them.
lot of water. I mean, so it's all over the place.
Right.
Uh, but with irrigation systems now, they're so smart, and I've hit the irrigation topic in nauseum with Hunter Industries. A lot of podcasts out. We're actually got another podcast next week coming up with Kevin. But the technology out now is absolutely amazing. The Wi-Fi technology anywhere in the world, I
Yeah.
can use this thing, and I can see what my irrigation system's doing, how much water it's using. I can change the times of the zones. I can shut them down. I can turn them up. I can check the wind, what the wind's doing. So make sure, hey, the wind's gonna be too high. So I want it to automatically shut off. So it's not blowing that water onto the driveway to wash down the street, which you mentioned
That
earlier.
happens a lot here.
Well, and then with the you start adding the water efficient heads, the MP
Yep.
rotators, you may run a little longer, but it's actually cutting your water usage down by 15 to 30%. And then you add the Wi-Fi controller with all the apparatuses, the rain sensor and a flow sensor. You could cut your water usage by 50% on that system. So you could drastically, the system will
Right.
pay for itself. You talk about things that you have to have it all this lavishness. These aren't things that are going to be these big expenses. They're actually going to pay them. They're going to pay themselves off in a very, very, very short time, 2 to 3 years, depending on how big your system is.
I'm
So,
I'm looking forward to when we'll have irrigation systems that can run off of rainwater. And
well,
because
they do
that's such a huge resource that we don't use very well.
they do have them. And Kevin and I were talking about this. We've installed one. We installed it in 2009. It's
Well,
basically
there used to be a gentleman in St. Louis that did that, but I don't think he's been there for several years.
the expense to which some of these systems cost, though, is the whole thing. At one point in time in St. Louis, at least, it was if you have a water retention system. So, and this is back when the rain gardens and BMPs and water retention really started off. It was basically a large pit in the ground,
Hmm.
and it had fabric, and then it was filled up with rock. And we said, well, why can't we just put basically like a concrete storm sewer in there
Right.
and put a pump in there and use that for the irrigation? And at that point in time, we were approved to do that. Now, if you do an irrigation system with that, you have to have all purple pipe, all that the heads where you might see like a blue or a teal color. It's all gonna be purple because it means non-potable water,
Right.
because it's gonna have a lot of stuff in it. But basically, the idea was that this cistern would fill up, and it did. And then when it would run dry, it had a valve that kicked back over to county water. But the thing about the
Ah,
system is it never kicked back over because it was such a deep and wide pit
nice.
with the grass that it constantly had enough ground, even in the drought. Even the drought, I think that was 2012. A few years after, I think we had a heavy drought here that it never went dry.
That's impressive.
So,
We had
so there's
we
a
had a
lot of
house out,
there.
trying to remember where it was. Southwest part of town. Anyway, we had a house that had they'd put a tank underground
Mhm.
to gather all the rainwater, but
Well,
they were
there's
using
some
it
commercial
more
developments.
selectively.
There's
So
some commercial developments doing that now. Now, I know we've been looking into it a little bit more recently, but because of some of the new regulations with it, there's a lot of expense into
yeah,
it,
that's
and
what
so
I've
the
heard.
return is something that has to be evaluated. So that's something actually Kevin from Hunter and I have talked a lot about, but and I'm excited to talk a little further about it. But I definitely agree with you 110%. Like we already have it. It's running off my roof. It's going into the
Right,
ground. It's going through my downspouts. I'm either putting it into the sewer or into this rain garden. Why can't I just harvest it and use it?
right.
And then when I don't need it, it kicks over to the actual water supply.
Well, and at the bare minimum, put a couple of rain barrels in and you can at least water the gardens off of them, which is our next step. Um, but surprisingly, a lot of homes in Oklahoma City don't have gutters, which is a
Really?
travesty on many counts because it doesn't protect your home from water. But at any rate, and you can't collect rainwater if you don't have a gutter.
That's
So,
very true.
but
So
water is a huge issue. And one of the easy ways to do it is just have a landscape or a garden that does not need irrigation. So use a lot of natural plants that are acclimated to the local climate. Um, we I don't think we watered our yard all summer. We just let it go a little bit browner this summer. Didn't have to mow it as much, so that was a nice
yeah,
byproduct.
yeah.
And once we get a decent rain, it bounces right back. So
So speaking of the point on plants, so my house, I don't have a lot of native plants. I like the unusual stuff, but at the same time, a lot of these plants we grow in our fields here just outside St. Louis. And it's in a valley, and kind of one of our tests with plants is if it can last the cold, if it can last the winter, uh, it will last anywhere in St. Louis. Because if you can't take the cold out of the ground or out of the air, but you can always put a little more water on it.
right.
But at the same time, when I'm talking about trees, I'm not talking about crazy exotic trees. I'm talking like the Persian Paradia is something my grandfather was just one of his favorite trees. It's like the name, it comes from the Middle East. It's where it originates from. But it's also called ironwood. It's very resilient against disease, pest, as well as it's resilient. It's very drought resistant. It's in the witch hazel family also.
Nice.
I have one on a berm on a boulder wall, has never been watered in 5 years since I put it in, ever. Never stressed, never did anything like that. But then you've got boxwoods, which again isn't native, but you can still get the look that you're looking for with boxwood, not hedging, because hedging is going to require a lot of water, a lot of maintenance to it. But if you want to use boxwoods as accents in the landscape, that's a plant that is very, very, very drought resistant. But then obviously all the native plants. There's so many some of the grasses and some of the perennials out
Right.
there that I love seeing the matrix mixes of them all. Whether it's little blue stem, I love little blue stem. We have a project that the homeowner gave me a picture of a native prairie that he wanted to replicate, and so between using native seed mixes and just different plugs and then different larger plants, we really have this cool prairie look going on in front of his house. But the
Nice.
grasses out there are absolutely amazing. And I always get a chill when I say grasses because everybody thinks of the old maiden grasses that blow over the yard and are miserable to keep up with, and then you can't dig them out of your yard. And I'm not talking those grasses. These are really great cultivars, just different plants that were different grasses, different strains of grasses that were propagated for specific uses, whether it was also to stay short, whether it was for the fall color, because grass has fall color and it's
Yep.
amazing, these red streaks and everything else. So I caution everybody to think like native plants. Don't think the stuff you will go out into the woods and see. There's different cultivars of those
Such a
things.
good point.
So that's what I'm saying. But it's just knowing the plants and knowing how you're placing things in the yard, and that will definitely add up for the water conservation side of things.
There's a great resource. The Missouri Botanical Garden has a great online resource that actually anybody can use. You don't have to be in Missouri, but just a big encyclopedia of plants, basically. And I've actually referred to that several times to help me because I'm not super green thumb. So that's been a great resource that I've used a number of times as well.
Oh yeah, no, I so designing when I was doing a lot more design work, even though I grew up on a tree farm and grew up in the garden center, my one thing that was wrong true in my one that was in the back of my head all the time is my dad used to tell me a story about my grandfather making him go and move a plant because it was too close to the house, a tree, and that was this one thing that always. So all the lessons that I had to learn the hard way, that was one thing that I never wanted to go back and have to do and eat that crow. So I used to always use the Botanical Gardens website or a number of others just to verify that my growth sizes were going to be accurate for how I'm designing into the landscape. And that's where I'm kind of beating this one to the dead horse also, but don't like when people are thinking about, even if it's adding one plant or designing a whole landscape, you want to think about how big this stuff actually gets, and you
Right.
gotta caution what you read on the web. Talk to the local experts because they know how things grow in a local
Yes.
climate. If you're in Oklahoma City or if you're in St. Louis, it's going to grow completely different than it grows in California.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. I've been yelled at because knockout roses weren't blooming in the middle of the wintertime. I said, this is St. Louis. So just definitely have this due diligence. Even if you think you know a plant, just doesn't hurt every once in a while. Check up on it, make sure that you're placing in the right spot for that future growth 5, 6, 10 years down the road.
Yep. Water is
All right.
vital, and there's lots of ways to affect it. So there you go.
So breathe well. This is another great topic that I love when it comes to plants,
Yep.
but I want you to hit this off. This is your category. I know it's probably broad for you, so take it.
Well, so one of the two critical things that we need to live as human beings is clean air and clean water. Well, we don't actually have to have it clean, but we do need air and we do need water. Those are vital to our survival. Having better air allows us to breathe better. And most people do not realize that our indoor environments are much more toxin rich, polluted than our outdoor air. Back in the 70s, it was the other way around, but we got a lot of the outdoor air issues addressed. Not in all cities. There's still layers of smog in many cities. But what happens inside our home is we have invisible enemies. And most of what comes into a home is stuff we bring in. Um, a lot of things like cabinetry or paints or flooring will eventually off gas. Off gas means they let go of those toxic chemicals. And everything has a different lifespan for how it off gases. But we hopefully a home sits empty for a little while before it's occupied when it's newly built or newly remodeled, and that gives things time to off gas
I've
some.
always heard that. Always heard
Right.
that.
But there's still going to be off gassing, but
Mhm.
it's lower levels. But then when we start cooking and not turning on the range fan, we take showers and we don't turn on the bathroom fan. We bring in dry cleaning, which is all kinds of fumes. Um, and take the bag out, go outside or in the garage and hang your dry cleaning without the plastic bag on it and let it air out for a few days
Yeah.
if you need to do dry cleaning, or find a green dry cleaner, even better. Um, but we bring in inadvertently so much stuff, and then how we live, we breathe. When we exhale water. So if there's not a ventilation system in the home, all that stuff stays in the home. And so first is you don't want to bring it in. Second is you want to get rid of what you do bring in through ventilation. And third is don't forget that moisture is a big part of what is in our hair, in our air, and contaminates it. And this is where we see the mold and the mildew. I'm one of those people that I start sneezing within a few seconds of being exposed to a fairly significant, well, not a huge amount, but a significant amount of mold or mildew. So I'm kind of like the canary in the coal mine. But oh my gosh, I went somewhere yesterday. Oh, I went to a little store. I was in and out in 10 minutes, and I got in my car and I reeked of perfume, very heavy,
Yeah.
very sweet perfume. And I don't normally wear perfume. And I had a sweater on. All I could figure is I was close enough to this person that had a lot on for a few moments that my sweater absorbed it. That was the craziest thing. Why? So I'm really sensitive to that smell. But even perfumes, they're made with synthetic fragrances, synthetic ingredients, and all of those can have toxins in them. Cleaning products,
Anything not natural.
biggies,
Anything not natural. Yeah.
and cleaning products. So anywho, I'll tip my hat early. So one of the things I often get asked is, what are the 3 things that I do that are my go-to list? And 3 things anybody can do. 1, LED light bulbs. Even if you just replace the most used light bulb, do that. Number 2, switch to green cleaning. It can be DIY. There's tons and tons of recipes out on the internet for making your own cleaners. But be really careful not to, make sure everything you're using is compatible, especially if you're mixing synthetic and natural. Like I was talking to somebody that was trying to clean up a mold issue and had used bleach and then was going to use vinegar. I said, no, 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 no. You don't want to do that. That makes a bad reaction. So no, don't do that. That there's just so many great products on the market. There's a checklist on a website called the Environmental Working Group that you can go through and check your products as well as your personal care products. So tons of options. No excuse there to use a better cleaner that doesn't off gas and leave stinkies in. And then the third thing that you might laugh about is use either recycled or tree-free toilet paper.
Well, that's a kind of a relevant topic with the year we had.
So this actually falls in category number 6, which is what I call green living or homeowner education.
We can keep, I mean, honestly, we can really kind of tie it all together. That's
I know, it all comes together.
But I think my wife and we watched that, I forgot what the name of the movie was, talks about Teflon.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And just like, that was a mind-blowing
and we're
movie, especially with all the facts about that movie behind the scenes and how every human being has that chemical in them. That kind of, my wife is all of a sudden next day, all day, she's looking at all the different chemicals that we have in the house. And before that, she already used all the pure cleaners or natural cleaners that are out there that she could find for cleaning the counter, for the dishwasher, and all, especially for, we've got a 9-month-old. So as much of the organic side of washing his clothes is what she tries to use for now, myself and my older boys, and you got to use something a little heavier duty on that. But she's definitely as pure as possible when it comes to all the cleaners in the house, floor cleaners and all that kind of stuff.
There are, I can recommend all kinds of things because there are really good options out there. Matter of fact, for cleaning products, there's a great company out of St. Louis. It makes an excellent line of cleaning products. It was started by 2 dads because they didn't want their kids crawling around in chemicals.
Well, just nobody realizes how much we're actually around. I think a lot of people kind of keep their head in the sand because they don't want to know, because they don't want to have to go through and change everything out to a point. I think part of it's just, there's a lot of work to it to get to that point.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I preach incremental green, or I should say teach, but I guess I preach it too. So as you use up something, you upgrade to something better. Mm-hmm. Or as you have to replace something, upgrade to something better. You're doing a weekend warrior project and replacing the faucets in the bathroom, get a low water faucet. You're repainting a room, get low VOC paint. You run out of cleaning supplies, upgrade to green cleaning supplies. So it's easy if you just do it as things come up. Here's the hard part is knowing. So you know how you go, it's knowing what to buy. So you know how you go to the grocery store and you have your circuit and you know exactly where what you buy is, and you go to those spots and you kind of go on autopilot, right? So whenever I'm looking for a new product or I need to try something new or I have a new recipe or a new challenge, then you have to stop in the store and read all the labels, do all the comparison, and you have to figure out what to buy. Or I was looking for better trash bags last night. We had 15 tabs open of different eco-friendly, in quotes, trash bags to look at. And they have to pass my husband's strength test. I'm trying to get something that's more in line with my thinking. And there's so many options. So it's like, how do you choose? And this is part of what I love doing because I am a research queen. So a lot of what I've experienced, I put out on my podcast, or it's in my book, or it's on my shop, because I don't want everybody else to have to go through all that research and figuring it out, because it's a lot of work. So that's probably the biggest challenge to people changing what they're doing, is that we've had these habits of what we buy. and it's pretty easy. But to change those habits takes some thought.
But it's well, you said habit.
Mhm.
There's things that I want to see us implement in my own family, where it's all the eggshells and all the byproducts and food that we put in the garden. Some kind of, you can probably help me with this also, is an eco-friendly bag that's not going to break or stink up the house or that kind of stuff that literally could almost just be tossed in the garden.
I
And
will let you know how these work out that I just ordered. I just ordered them
perfect,
last night.
perfect.
And
But
I found a lot of bags that are compostable. They're made out of plant starch.
huh, interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely into that side of things because I love my gardens and I'm big into not putting a lot of chemicals
Yeah.
in my garden. So
Yeah. And
um,
there's just all kinds of options out there. So figuring it out is a big deal. But I will
uh,
find one for you.
perfect. Thank you. So the last thing I was in on the breathe well kind of green living together is one of the things that really kind of amplified my passion for everything that we do with plants is not just inside. Everyone knows house plants, and the Sansevieria and the air quality effects of it. My gym has two of them. I walk down to the locker room. There's two Sansevierias sitting right there in the gym. No daylight. It's lit. It's only lit by two can lights that are very dim.
Oh,
They do great. Sansevieria does not need a lot of light, so it's a plant that is pretty much almost indestructible.
I need
Um,
that.
it's there, and there's so many different varieties of them now too. The different, and some of them I've seen us get in the heights they have, 5, 6 foot tall. I've been around, but not house plants. I've not seen a lot of that stuff. So the lady who's got bringing the stuff in, she's doing an awesome job. But nonetheless, is everybody's at home right now, and so this conversation is very relevant because everybody's in their homes now more than they
Oh my
ever
gosh,
used
are
to be.
we?
And not only that, some of them are remodeling their homes. They're bringing new furniture
Yep.
because of the new offices. And
Yep.
so all those VOCs you're talking about, all these toxins, all this, they're bringing all this into the house. And so I like to think, and I strongly believe that, green living, whether it's just in the products that you're using or, supplementing it with um, plants or, adding that kind of just vibe to the room adds, and it's a fact. You can go to Texas A&M's Benefit of Plants site, and it has a whole list of studies about what plants do for the economy, obviously for the environment,
Yep.
and for a number of other things. But one of them is just the calming effect that plants have on humans, just having them in the proximity of whatever room they're in or wherever they're at, whether it's even working out in the garden, work on the
Yep.
back porch, or working in an office if the outside temperatures aren't conducive to working outside. There's so many cool things out there that add just a bit of interest to it. And so we're seeing there's a huge uptick in the amount of people investing in kind of just greening up the inside again, whether it's plants or whether it's just really paying
Got it.
attention to what they've got going on in the home because they're there more. It's not a second thought or a third thought. It's primary now because everything's happening there. They're with their kids every day. They're with their spouse every day. I mean, there's so much happening in the home.
Well, and you need views, like you can't see it from here, but my desk sits next to a window that looks out over my front garden. So I have that bit of nature all the time while I'm, in my little cubby hole. Um, Indoor plants too. And NASA actually published a list of 10 house plants, and gosh, this was back in the 80s, that help to reduce the chemical load inside of your home. So this
I
is
remember
another.
you and I talking about that. You and I actually talked about that article when I think it was one of the first times we met. We were talking
Yeah,
about it.
I think you're right. But that's fortunately one of the I can only really grow 2 indoor plants, and fortunately, both of them are on that list. I'm like, "Okay." And one of them is mother-in-law tongue, which is like I've been growing since college, because it's practically indestructible, and I need that. I can actually kill a succulent or an aloe plant. Don't ask me how. My mom has aloes everywhere, and I can't keep the darn things alive.
Oh,
But the other thing is just, just having that little bit of nature. Um, we started. I have this lady that I've known through a coaching group, and she started a habit that she called forest bathing. Well, I didn't know forest bathing really was a thing. So, Hang on, I'll tell you what forest bathing is in case you don't know.
No, I know what it is, but anybody that hasn't heard that term before, I remember the first time I heard it, what I thought about of it. So
It's not that. And it is simply for all y'all laughing at us right now. It is actually being able to walk intentionally and in nature, in trees particular. And I've even learned to go so far as I reach out and touch trees. We have a nature park not too far from my home where we walk a few times a week until it was decimated by the ice storm. Um, but I literally have 4 trees in there that are my favorite trees, and I walk up and I touch them or I hug them. And there's several pictures on my Facebook feed of me hugging my trees. But we love it out there because there is something about the forest. So you're bathing yourself in the forest trees. You're bathing your psyche, you're bathing your mind, your eyes, your ears. That's really the intent of this. But it's incredibly calming. It's good exercise. It's it's beyond one of the things I have loved about going out. This place is not hiking, but it's mild hiking. One of the things I so appreciate every time we go out there is that I get something from my mind, from my spirit, and from my body. And that's plants. That is these magnificent trees and plants. And we get to see all the diversity that they support and the wildlife. And that connection is very, very almost spiritual for me. But I
Two
find that
points on
we
that.
need plants.
2 points on that. You look at all these big brand corporations, and you look at these just state-of-the-art campuses that they're building. You even look at you look at all the hospitals, the
Yeah.
newer hospitals, and even the retrofits on the old hospitals. You look at some of the newer schools and college campuses, universities. You see a huge emphasis on the greenery, the landscape, not landscape plant, landscape, at a macro level,
Outdoor rooms. Yeah.
because of the performance that they know it helps enable, the views out to the green spaces, the ability to walk through it, basically forest bathing, if you want to call it that, walking through these campuses in some of these areas, because there is something to it. It's a calming effect.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I lost my mind on the second point, but that's when I think about it, I can literally see all this in my head, all these campuses that I've had the privilege of seeing. But on the energy side of it, I mean, if you believe in energy and all those kind of things, I remember I was over in Europe, and there was a few people I was talking to over there, and that was a big thing that they used to always talk about. They would go out. This was down in Sicily, but they would actually take time to go down, sit under a tree, and depending on the time of the season or something with the seasonality, they're actually the same thing. Put their hand on the tree. And it was more of a spiritual thing to them. It was just something that was calming. It was something that would just basically bring them peace, if you would. A better way of saying it.
Yeah. I mean, as younger, I would walk barefoot in the grass, although now I'm scared to do that with all the chemicals we use on our lawns. I don't even let my dog walk on
That's
them.
a whole nother podcast.
I know. We shouldn't open that Pandora's box.
Yeah, we'll save that one for another one. That's actually a good topic. I'm gonna note that one. You and I can jump on that.
Oh, I get on my hot buttons with that because Anyway.
Well, Marla, where can people find your podcast, all your social media, and everything else about you?
So we are greenhomecoach.com. Or I am. We in the royal sense, right? Ha ha. And that'll connect you to the podcast archive. That'll connect you to the shop, Everyday Green Home Shop. That'll connect you to my book. If you want a kind of how to get started guide, I talk through some of these same topics we talked about and some actions that you can take. So yeah, everything's there. And if you're looking for me on Instagram or Facebook, it's just at Green Home Coach. And then, of course, and all the other suspect places. I don't do a lot on Twitter, though. You can also find me on LinkedIn just by my name. So I think we're out there. We just started actually because I have some help on this, but we've actually started putting a lot more out on Pinterest, and we're getting some really good response there, especially to some of these product swaps, and helping people to learn about those.
Awesome. Oh, don't forget, get back to me on the compost bag. I'm excited
I will.
about that.
I will.
So
I
my
actually
wife's not probably excited about it, but I'm excited about it.
yeah, I pulled one up last night that I think it'd be a great fit for you. I just got to go find it. But it was compostable in a home compost, not
Okay.
just a commercial. And that's a big thing with a lot of those trash bags is that they say they're compostable and they're certified compostable, but only in an industrial or commercial compost
Landfill.
facility,
Yeah. Okay.
which we don't have a lot of in the Midwest, but they do have some of them out on the coasts.
Got it.
Okay.
All right, Marla. Well, thank you. Great seeing you.
Hey, it's awesome to see you too. And thanks. Have a great day.
And stay in touch. Bye.